We'll call the meeting to order at 6:03. All board members are present with the exception of Alice Todd, who could not be here tonight. She's excused. First up is review and approval of the February 7th deliberative session minutes.
Motion to approve the February 7th deliberative session minutes as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Next up is February 13th public meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the February 13th, 2024 public meeting minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Date and location of the next meeting is March 26th here at Belmont High School. First up is public communication and correspondence. Anyone from the public like to address the board? Okay. Seeing none, student representatives, Belmont Middle School, you're up first.
Okay. So in 5th grade, they had their Camp Cody raffle fundraiser, and yesterday there was a parent meeting to discuss it. And then in ELA, they're writing narratives and reading novels, and in social studies, they're learning about the Vikings.
For 6th grade in ELA, they're doing an IXL challenge, where if you finish 40 codes successfully, you get to go to a party that I believe Mr. Noyes hosts with pizza and ice cream.
Did you say 40 codes?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what that is?
IXL is just a learning program, so they're like codes, they're like 3-letter or digit codes, and it just brings you to like a link where you just do a lesson.
Okay, so if they do 40 lessons, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
They're also working on narratives, and in science, they're doing an essay about weather and climate change, and in ELA lab, they're doing an essay about the Titanic.
In 7th grade for science, they started Mammal March Madness. It's similar to like the basketball thing, but it's like animals instead of basketball teams. And then in social studies, they're learning about different types of government, and in ELA, they're doing informational writing.
For 8th grade, there was recently a presentation about possible freshman classes, and 8th graders were recommended high school classes by teachers. We just finished summatives in science, social studies, and ELA. For science, we're working on the life cycle of a star and our solar system. For social studies, we were supposed to write a 5 to 7 paragraph essay about a historical figure or battle during the Civil War. And for ELA, we had 3 options. We could make a poster about writing versus internal versus external conflicts, an essay analyzing how internal or external conflicts can change people, or a test with multiple choice options on the book we read, and 3 short responses.
For 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we had a Valentine's Day dance sponsored by Student Council, and we're having another upcoming dance soon sponsored by the 8th grade.
There was recently a new issue of Bulldog Spark that came out on February 12th.
We had Winter Carnival on the 22nd and 23rd of February, and then on the 20th we had Winter Activities Day. And
we just finished writing state testing last week.
The NJHS introduction ceremony will be held on the 20th.
And athletics spring sports signups were just started.
Any questions?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kate, BHS.
Okay. So I just wanted to, before I start with the report that I wrote, I had a couple of other things that I wanted to mention. The first one being at the last school board meeting that I was unable to attend. I did watch the recording of it, and I just wanted to mention that with the recommendations that you guys talked about concerning the withdrawal study, I just wanted to say from a student's perspective, that communication is really key. There's been talk for a number of years now about the website and how we could improve that to help students. Having an area where there is an easy-to-access list of all of our clubs and activities that we offer, and sort of just some general things like that, so students have that resource to go to. And I think that that would make a big difference for students as well as parents. So I'm glad that communication was on there, and I think that that's really important.
Question, you're talking about the BHS website, like the public-facing website?
Yes,
correct?
yes. But I think that I don't know what the other schools' websites have for that sort of thing. I haven't looked at them in a long time, but I would say that probably be something we would want consistent across those schools as well. So if they aren't already there, the same thing goes for those schools. The other thing is there's been a lot happening on the high school. I didn't include it in here, but Winter Carnival was really exciting this year. I didn't want to talk about it because I'm a senior and we lost and it was very sad. But it was really fun. It definitely the best Winter Carnival I've experienced, and I heard some of the teachers talking about it. They were really excited about how excited the students were. So that was a really fun Winter Carnival, and even though we lost, it was definitely our best performance for all of high school by far. So that was really fun. So for my board report, talking about grading again, which I know I supposedly finished last time, but we had a brass meeting that had a lot of student involvement in it, and we discussed some things that I thought would be important to share with you. This discussion came out of us talking about a draft IK, which I think has been changed a little bit more and since then. So, but the comments I have on here are not specifically about like the wording on that or anything. They're more general comments that I wanted to talk about. Some of them might seem specific to like just the high school policy, but I think that it's important that all of the schools are aware of these things, because how students perceive the grading system starts in elementary and middle school. So I think it's really important for that to be consistent across, especially in the middle school, but some for the upper grades of the middle school. So that's why they're in here. So the overarching theme is that most of our students, I did talk to our brass members before I published this, is that all of our graded assignments should be graded on a 1 through 4 scale. So
can I stop you there for a moment? So
Yes.
I'm assuming you mean that if we're using a 1 through 4 scale, that all assignments should be graded 1 to 4, not necessarily the students saying we want to use the 1 through 4 scale.
yes, so the discussion we had was with the assumption that we would be using the 1 through 4 scale.
Okay.
So we weren't talking about other systems.
Gotcha. Gotcha. But every assignment needs to be graded on the full range of whatever grading scale is being used. That's what that statement is going for.
That would be correct.
That was my clarifying question, was whether it's a 1 to 4 or 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, whatever, the formative should match the...
So,
Yes, that's my understanding. We didn't specifically talk about that, but from the conversation, yes. So for this, you guys probably already know this, but I did include for background information that when we have this discussion, a lot of times we're going to be using the words formative and summative. So while that's not specifically in the wording, we use it a lot. So usually something on assignment that some teachers would consider using a 2 out of 2 or a 3 out of a 3, something like that. That's normally considered formative work. So if I bring that word up, basically that's just work that you do ahead of time that helps prepare you for the summative assignment. So Formative work is often a baseline to jump from, so that means that if the baseline is not graded on a 1 through 4 scale, it's often difficult to grade the related assignments. I did talk to some of my teachers about this, and they basically said that, if you're working on a skill and you do some formative work about that, it's important that that work is graded out of 1 through 4 so that when you do additional work, you can compare it and see the different levels there. It also gives students information about where they stand, so it's really hard as a student to know what a 2 out of 2 means because it's such a small, like you either get a 1 or a 2. There's not much there, and as a student doing these assignments, it's confusing to have a 2 out of 2 on something and then a very similar assignment, similar skills being assessed is now out of a 4. It makes it hard to track your progress, understand where you are. Graded formative work is very rarely work that students would view as something not deserving of a 1 through 4. So the most common thing I hear when we're having this discussion is that assignments that don't show a 4-level skills shouldn't be graded out of a 4, which I understand, and I think just as students we don't see that, and so therefore having those 2 out of 2 options just makes it more confusing. Most of our work, even if it's formative, even if it's a lower level understanding of something, is still work we believe you could grade out of a 4. 2 students of 4 is doing all that you've been asked to do and doing it to the best of your ability with a high level of accuracy and understanding. That seems like something that you would be able to assess on all assignments, whether it's a complex or simple skill. An analogy I used in here was in English, we wrote a compare-contrast essay about crackers before we wrote the essay comparing a book to a movie. So that's a good example to me of the cracker thing. Like, yes, that's simpler because you're comparing food and not, a more complex book and movie, but it's still assessing those skills, and it still should be graded out of 4, and for that one it was. Considering a 4 to be above and beyond, which is some of the words we've been using, I believe that's changing. So, but either way, this is something that I recently thought about, is having that sort of high, super level of reaching does put some students at a disadvantage, and we don't want that. We want our school to have learning opportunities for all students, regardless of where they come from. This is something that I hadn't considered in my previous discussions about the grading system, so I wanted to put that in now, just as a reminder to me and to all of us that that's really important when we're looking at the wording and grading things. Allowing teacher discretion on this issue, so it's like, as of right now, some teachers don't grade using anything but 1 through 4 on all of their assignments, but some teachers do. So it's really important that that inconsistency is not there. As I said in my last report, that was sort of the major student concern, is inconsistency, so that definitely plays into it. And then the last thing, this doesn't have specific data to back it up, it was just a potential theme, is the high school is currently facing a really high percentages of students failing in their classes. Keeping all assignments on a 1 through 4 scale could potentially allow more students more options to demonstrate their knowledge in a way that's applicable to their standard scores, potentially making those scores higher. So that is a very small detail, it's only a possibility, but I did want to put it on there. Are there any questions I can answer?
I guess I'll ask one, but I think more of a question for Michael, but I assume the above and beyond topic is something that's being discussed amongst the teachers and everybody. Just like, I'm going to date myself, but like back when I was a kid, there might be extra credit or something like that that would take your grade above, maybe a perfect score or something like that. But the whole above and beyond thing has always been confusing to me, because the grading scale is something, then that's what every student should be able to reach. Considering,
that's what most students have been saying, and I think hopefully the new wording will support that. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm hoping that it will.
So in the draft policy that the internal policy committee is going to see on the 26th, 4 is titled as proficient with distinction.
Isn't it already, aren't 4s already labeled as such, or no?
No, they were not. With more of a descriptor than just above and beyond describing what that is.
Other questions for Kate?
Kate, you may not be able to answer this, but why do you think that the high school is currently facing a high percentage of students failing their classes?
Well, we are hopefully going to talk about this at our next BRAS meeting. I think and something I noticed when I was looking at the data that Mr. Finch had compiled for us is that it's not just the freshmen, which I think is a common theme in the past, is freshmen coming up, it's sort of like a reality check and saying, oh, like, this is really different. And I think that does have to do with our grading system, and I think our grading system definitely plays a role in it. It's not the only reason, and there's certainly lots of other ones, but I think the fact that it's students from mostly the first 3 grades shows it's not just a simple, like, moving up to high school type thing. I would say the other thing is a lot of the failures were coming from math classes, so I think that definitely is important, changing what resources are offered or how. I haven't been in a math class at the high school for a very long time, so I don't know what it looks like now, but I think that probably needs to be looked at.
I think the answer is no, but if you guys are looking at these issues from the student level, I wonder if there's any data that can be had by either guidance or by the SAU to see what failure rates were pre-competencies when there was a 100-point scale. Those numbers may be the same, as far as failures versus not failures. I have no idea.
Yeah, I would say that there might be data, but I wouldn't think it would be comparable because there's so much change in general, I would say it's probably really difficult to compare those looking at just based on the grading changes. We've had a lot of other changes as well that I would say probably impact that.
I was going to ask Mr. Finch this question. I still will, but I'll ask you from a student perspective. But do you think students would benefit from having some type of study skills course? And do you feel like students know how to prepare for, we now have a test at the end of the semester, which is a huge part of their grade. I just question whether our students know how to prepare over the course of a semester for, summative exams, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We don't have anything like that right now. I think it's really kind of a personal thing. Like, some students take it upon themselves to really prepare. It does depend on the classes you take. Some classes really prepare you well for that, and some don't because it's just not a part of how the classes run. So potentially that might be something helpful to some students.
Jill?
So this isn't for you, Kate. This is more a middle school question, and you don't have to answer fully tonight, but I would be curious, as middle schoolers, do you feel like you understand how you're being graded in the middle school?
For the most part, yes, but it can be a little confusing, just depending on the teacher and how they, use the scale.
So do you find similar, maybe some inconsistencies from teacher to teacher?
A little bit, yes.
Thank you.
I don't know if mine's for Kate, but so last year when we were in, I think it was this meeting, talking about the students failing, it was primarily freshmen. And then we were told that you see some 10th grade and then it tapers off. But whereas the bulk of them are coming from math, have there been any other changes? Have there been staffing changes?
Yeah, we have pretty much mostly new math department. I think we only have 2 teachers now that have been here for a while. So that definitely is a huge part of it. I don't know specifically, but I've heard a lot of sort of just rumors around me. Most of the students that are talking about failing classes, it's all related to math and it's related to those new teachers.
So a follow-up question, this definitely isn't for you, but are they trained in how to use our grading system with new teachers coming in? Like I know we talked about teachers that have experience with the 1 through 4 and teachers that haven't.
Yeah, so we heard that as a concern at the beginning of this conversation back in August. So one of the things we're putting into place is we're dedicating time prior to the start of the school year for any new staff member coming in to get a full, or I should say a better understanding of our grading scale prior to starting grading. So we are committing a whole day, quite honestly, to our grading practices and so forth. And from what we've heard is that, again, it varies the skill set of our new staff coming in, working with a 4-point scale. However, the majority of them have experienced either being graded on a 4-point scale, particularly for some of our younger staff that are coming in, or being exposed to a 4-point scale. So we are upping our professional development prior to the start of the school year with our new staff.
Other questions regarding Kate's report? Thank you, Kate. Thorough as always. Thank you. Okay, principal's report. Mr. Hill's report is first in our packet.
It's Canterbury.
Okay, Canterbury, I know, I don't think Mrs. Chubb could be here tonight.
She could not.
Correct. So I don't know if we have questions for her that Michael could bring back or answer.
I did not have questions for her.
Okay. Now, Mr. Hill at BES. Do we have questions for Mr. Hill? He's here. I was excited we got a new sign. Where'd that come from? Like, did we budget for that?
We use this year's funds for it, yeah.
We use this year's funds. Okay.
Yeah,
I
we
like
have-
it. It looks great. I just was curious where we found the money, because I knew we had talked at one point about how expensive the new sign was going to be, so I was just curious that it hadn't come to, just to be honest, I was surprised it hadn't
This
come
is the
to.
same sign that we put at the SAU, correct? Same style?
Similar style,
Yeah,
yeah.
it looks great.
We didn't end up going with the initial proposal that the board looked at, had a digital sign that went along with it. It was very expensive. Even
That's
for the
what-
digital board was $30,000.
Right,
So
that's why.
We did not go that big.
This did not look like a
No.
$30,000 sign, but I don't know what that looks like.
Right.
Excellent. Looks great. So much better.
I agree. My personal opinion, those digital ones, I think just look gaudy. But that's just a personal opinion, I think it does. I think what we have, I think looks great.
Okay, any questions? BMS, so not only did we have Mr. Pope's report, but we had our student reps did a great job going through some of this as well.
One question. I know it's been a number of years, but can you remind me why, I think we're doing Camp Cody in the spring, correct? Why we went away from the fall? Because we used to do those in the fall, I thought.
I believe we only did it 1 year in the fall, and that was our initial year. And we got quite a significant discount to do it in the fall. And then we really felt that we wanted to do it before April break, because when kids come back, they're dirty, tired, time for a break, things like that. So we've been doing it the week before April break for
Yeah, I
a
thought so.
long time.
Okay.
I have a question on Insight for Life. Is that being offered to all students at the middle school, and how is it being offered to them?
Yes, eventually. We're kind of staggering in there just because of their availability. So 5th grade has gone through the program. They're in, 6th and 7th right now. We're utilizing, they're in conjunction with our school counseling classes, that work through our lab classes. So there's once every other week that they're in the grade levels working with the kids during the lab instruction time.
Anything else? Okay. Actually, just one thing with the maple sugar, I haven't forgotten, so maybe treats will come at some point.
I tried to get you some tonight, to be honest with you. It just wasn't quite ready.
It's not
yet.
quite ready, okay. No, I'm kind of kidding, but it just was, but not really. I just think it's amazing what the students, and I know you reported
Well,
on
and
it too.
the weather's really, for those of you who do any type of sugaring, the weather up and down has been, it's been interesting. So they're happy because it was running again, and then some up and downs, but, so they're starting to produce and bottle some things, and it just wasn't ready enough for me to bring you a sample tonight, so sorry. Next
That's
time.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good luck to the students involved as they go into competition, so. All right, BHS, Mr. Finch. Questions for Mr. Finch? He very thoroughly, broke it out for us. Thank you very much for that.
So, just in general, and I think this probably depends on the course, but take an average math course, for example. I don't know how many over the course of the semester, how many assignments there are before I'll call it the big summative at the end. But as a parent, how would I know if my child was having problems in a course? Because I'm always afraid that you would learn too late, if that makes sense. To the point where by the time I find out, they really have to do great the rest of the way just to get competency. I guess that's in the back of my head as far as, I know some families, some kids, they may not even care. But I know that there's a lot of families that do, a lot of kids that care. How do we catch this before we're at the end of the semester? Is there progress monitoring? That's my biggest concern.
Okay, so can I ask just a clarifying question? When you said the big summative, did you mean the final assessment at the end of the course, or do you mean like assessments throughout the class that are kind of end of unit things, or kind of the big cumulative? Which of those two did you mean?
I think you mean summative on the standard, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was like, yeah, so a big 4-point assessment that is going in there that is specific to a standard. It varies, honestly. Some of the standards are more aligned to content than other classes that have them more aligned to skills that get repeatedly taught and kind of circle back to. So sometimes what you find is a course has design standards that are sequential, right? You alluded to math classes,
Yeah.
and that's one of them. We all know that math skills are sequential, and you're kind of building on those building blocks. So to answer the progress monitoring, we previously had 2 grade updates. There was one at the end of the first quarter, kind of like a midterm check-in, and then there was a end of semester. We added 2 more, so now there's 4. That actually started last year. So there's 4 different times, and it's just actually Thursday morning is the next time that grades are going to be updated for students. And that's halfway through the first quarter. So it's literally like midterm of the quarter, midterm of the second quarter, and then final. So there's 4 different times, and those are 4 different eligibility checks for sports, extracurriculars, and things like that. So it's tough to answer the first part of the question, like how many formative assessments are there prior to, because it's going to vary. If it's a sequential course, there's usually more, because students don't have as many, opportunities to do summatives as the course goes along. What we have found, as the board knows, we have 2 big policy changes in terms of, grading practices this year. It's the late policy and the reassessment policy. Some of the students who I think, particularly in some of the sequential standards, were some who had previously been I'm gonna get this done at the last minute, or, pass things in, at the end of the day or whatever. And now there's policy language about it. So it impacted some students that they didn't have an opportunity to reassess on something that happened sequentially, like, those first or second standards, until literally the final. And so their grade was impacted by that for a while. And that was communicated, again, particularly if a student was found on, one of the tiers of ineligibility, that was communicated not only by the teacher, but also by Mr. Bellier, who ran the check and sent that out and, sent those notifications. So it's tough to answer the question, but definitively, all grades are updated and all standards that students have had enough opportunity to demonstrate their skill in are updated a minimum of 4 times.
And do formatives go into, do families get information on how the student's doing with formative assessments to know, to track progress on a summative?
Yeah, to be honest, that varies too, and it varies more probably than it should.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we need to look at going forward. And, we've been having conversations about learning management systems or grade systems or whatever. And that's one of the things that is in my head in terms of how to approach that. Kate, was very eloquent in alluding to, the concept of formative assessment, right? And respectfully, Kate, I'll disagree with you a little bit on some of the things that you said. Because sometimes a formative assessment isn't giving students or isn't asking students to do the absolute utmost of what a standard, could do, or how that can be assessed, or how that can be applied to the real world, things like that. Skills need foundational blocks. If you're utilizing, new vocabulary terms and you're going to end up putting that into a paper or something like that, first you've got to demonstrate that you know what the word means. It could be I know these are really, kind of scaled down, but that could be as simple as you've got 10 vocab words and you do a matching section. Yes, I know the definition and it's a quick little assessment, but then utilizing those in context is a whole different approach. It's a whole different level of skill and understanding and demonstration of proficiency and mastery of that skill. So the way to report those and where to report those is a question when it comes to the grading system, of the learning management system and things like that too. But I think that honestly is probably more internal practice language that we need to look at between now and next year.
Well, and I think I guess speaking as a parent, I get it philosophically, you need those foundational skills, but it doesn't make sense from a parent trying to track progress. If my son came home with a 2 out of 2, I'd be like, why do you have a 2? Well, that's all I could get. Well, what do you mean that's all you can get? So I think I personally think that's some of the problem is, what does it mean when does it mean you can get
Yeah.
4 out of 4
Yeah.
compared to 2 out of 2?
Yeah, and one of the things, so obviously we had a professional development day today, and the high school and middle school staffs got together for the majority of the afternoon to work together to, look at policy language and then to get content areas together and look at, vertical alignment between grades 5 to 12. Looked at grading scales and proficiency scales. And, one of the, it was one of the middle school teachers who brought up the point, and then it became, because I worked with the ELA, or the English group, and there was a lot of discussion about making sure that students have an opportunity to practice what that 4 looks like, prior to their kind of being set out on their own to do that summative assignment. There has to be instruction, there has to be opportunity to practice what that application stuff looks like, that high level, capacity. Otherwise, students don't really know that they are ready or that they will be successful. So it's absolutely in conversation, and it's got to be something that we work more into practice.
So you definitely hit the head of the nail. I mean, all I can speak to is the middle school. I can't speak to, what exists at the high school, but I know for my own kids, and we have that exact conversation, Michelle, where, they'll show me something and yep, it's a 2. Well, that's the highest grade I could, that I could get. You can go on and look at their grades, and yep, it's 2 out of 2, 2 out of 2, for these formative assessments. And then when a progress report comes out, they, sometimes they'll still be a 2. And it's like, well, how, I mean, at this point, or a report card, or whatever you want, however you want to look at it, if this is the end of a term, and you haven't been given the opportunity to get a 3 or a 4, that's a problem. Or at least I consider that to be a problem.
At the high school, the hardest eligibility check or grade update is the first one of the semester, because the grading system is built around the process of learning and a student having multiple opportunities and students having a body of evidence. And the less time a student has, the fewer pieces of evidence they've been able to submit. So the progress report philosophy that we have, or it's in our faculties and staff guidelines and resources document, the progress report is only based on standards in which the student has had opportunities to demonstrate, proficiency. And that doesn't mean all, formative 2 out of 2. So we don't report out on all the standards. There's many standards that at this point, a quarter of the way through the semester, teachers haven't even alluded to yet, let alone taught. So we limit it down, and we only report out on those that they have had an opportunity to do that point. And the further you go, the more standards that you have that you can call on.
I'm really curious with math, and I believe students in brass, based on rumor that I'm hearing, are asking questions about competencies related to math. And so I think that could possibly play into the discussion, because there may be some inconsistencies with how one teacher, if a student gets 1 wrong, that's a 2.5. But another student may, another teacher grading the same thing. It's like, what are you measuring? You're measuring how many the students got wrong, or you're measuring the competency. So I have to, I'll just be honest, I have to wonder how much that factors in to 43 courses, semester 1 by subject. Anyway, I think math is, sometimes more black and white, depending on quite frankly, what I've seen from numerous math teachers at the high school is most times it's showing your work and those types of things. Mm-hmm. But if that's it, we may need to do, we collectively, whoever that is, mm-hmm. do a deeper dive into how competencies are being measured in math. Not that I want to lessen how it's being done, but it does give me pause, especially since 30 recovered. Like that's great, but it gives me pause to want to know more.
Yeah, you probably noticed and that department is doing those things, and they are looking at those. You probably noticed in the program of studies that added to the, I think Sean alluded to, a 100-page Word packet. Right? There's a lot of revision in the descriptor of a lot of those math courses, and that is in reflection to skill levels that are being seen coming into those classes, making sure some of the foundational skills are there too. So that team is working hard to figure out what it is that needs to change. There's no denial that there needs to be revision.
I mean, I'm just, with 107 students eligible for recovery, that just seems like a large.
That's not actually, that's 107 who did not pass within the scope of the semester.
Right.
So, yeah, sorry.
That's still a large,
it's huge.
alarming number that
Yeah.
we have 363 students or something around that. I mean, to me, is that, do we really have that many students who just are not learning at the rate that they should be learning? Or is it, they don't understand the grading policy? I mean, that's just alarming to me that we still have that many. I thought after last year that maybe it would be better this year.
Yeah.
Well, I think it speaks to, like, what does I know there's no comparison, so let me say that up front. I understand there's no comparison to a 100-point scale, but I have to wonder if we are saying a 2.5 is passing, if we were on a 100-point scale and 63 was a D- and you could get credit, that's 63 to 100. Right now we have 2.5 to 4. So I'm more looking at and I said this before, the bands so I'm actually questioning, people might not like this, but is 2.5 too high to receive credit? I'm not saying they have competency, I'm saying for credit, but then it begs the question, what does competency mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know what it means, but what does it mean in relation to what we're asking? Mm-hmm. But one could argue when a student got a 63 as a D-, were they actually competent in the subject? Probably not, but they passed and they got a credit. And so I don't know if there's a difference between competency versus credit bearing. Just gonna say that out loud.
According to even our current definition, there is, because a student does not have to be proficient in every single standard in order to get credit for a class. So the exact question that you are asking is a question that is being discussed at every level at the school. Is this an adjustment that needs to be considered?
I don't know how you can get credit for something if you're not competent at it, though.
But the students never did. I mean, to be blunt about it.
I know, but if we're moving to a competency-based system, we have to.
Well, and I put this huge red flag up, I forget which district I was helping go into competencies, and I used foreign language as an example. When I took foreign language, I could figure it out on a quiz or on a test if I was writing it out. I had no conversational skills. So consequently, I didn't get an A in foreign language. I got either B-, B- or C+. Why did I achieve that grade? Because I never had the conversational skills. Now, if you fast forward to foreign language with competencies, and one of those competencies is conversational, French or Spanish, if I perform the exact same way now that I did then I would not achieve that competency. I would not be found competent in that, within that curriculum. Is that right? Is it wrong? I don't know, but it's one of the huge consequences for going to a full competency-based curriculum. Because not everybody is going to have conversational Spanish or French. Not everybody is going to master all of algebra, algebra 2, or trig. Does it mean that they don't achieve credit? I can't say that. If you want to live within the world of full-blown competencies, the answer is pretty clear. The answer is no. If you're not competent in the 4 or 5 competencies, then you don't achieve that. And it's a philosophical on what do we want to see.
And I think the argument you just made was in favor of something like what we have right now is the 2.5. because there were basic levels of understanding, which is the 2, but if students, kind of throwing your example in, there might be some skills that can be assessed on those paper tests, and you kind of write things out, or you can write conversational French or Spanish or whatever, and so you were at a certain level of proficiency when it comes to that skill, but when it comes to speaking, you may not be strong, but you have to have some level of growth. You got to show some level of skill. So hypothetically, if those were the 2 standards in a course, and one was a 3 and one was a 2, at present, the present, at the moment, grading practices of the high school, you could still get credit for the course.
This is something that Brass has talked about on a couple of occasions. We are a group of pretty high achieving students. We were all elected at some point to a position, so most of us have pretty good grades. It's not a requirement to be in Brass, but that's just sort of how the group is. So knowing that, our perspective has mostly been 2.5 seems appropriate because it doesn't make sense for students to be passing the course if they don't understand the content. But at the same time, that's sort of our perspective going into it, is that we tend to have pretty good grades, so passing with the 2.5 is attainable for most of us. I would be curious to see, I talked to some students about this, but what other students who don't always hit that passing mark, how their perspectives might differ on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading this and I'm going back and forth, I'm wrestling in my own head about my desire, I'm just one person here, my desire to, raise the bar and have students that graduate that are great students going to high achieving, wherever they want to go.
Yeah.
But then I'm worried about setting the bar so high, we're setting kids up to fail maybe.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a subset of students that are going to struggle in this concept, and whether it's this year or next year, if we don't make any changes, it's just going to continue on.
Well, and we just saw last month that, or early March, last month that we had students leave the high school.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's because they weren't making the mark. I don't know that, but I don't know. And again, I don't want to set low standards either. That's not what I'm saying, but I think we have to wrestle with what is credit bearing, what are we expecting?
Yeah. So later on, you have this section, which is great, attendance participation rate by students who did not recover a course credit.
Yeah.
And it's clear that there are students that are just not putting in the effort. They're not
Right.
showing up. Yeah, so 20 of the kids didn't show up for 0 days, basically.
So I do want to put one little asterisk on that. And I can go back, I don't think it's a whole lot, it's probably a small handful. But keep in mind, if you look at the number of students who qualified for recovery, it is not a direct correlation between the number of students and the number of courses, because some of those students qualified for multiple. So there are, again, it's not all of them, but there are a handful of students in here who didn't attend a course at all or often because they were elsewhere working on another course, like recovering another course. Okay, does that make sense? So a student who qualified for 2 different courses, they may have gone to both of them 4 days, or they might have gone to one of them for 2 days, knocked out the recovery, and then made the transition to the other one, or it was taking them a longer amount of time to recover one of the courses, and so they didn't have as many days in the other.
Yeah, but if you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, I mean, we're not, there's not that many students that are in so many days for one class that they can't appear for another one.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned about, we do have a subset of students that appear, at least to me looking at this, that they're not even putting in the effort.
Yes. So,
And
yeah, sorry.
I certainly don't want to lower the bar for the sake of lowering the bar because of effort. But I don't know how we as a school district get through to them and their families. And when I say families, I'm thinking of traditional families, but as, you know, I'm well aware, there are a lot of families, there's a lot of kids that don't even have traditional families now, and it's just, I don't want to lose those kids, and I don't know how we get through to them, because they obviously don't want to show up in some cases.
Yeah. Or finally, they show up and all of a sudden they're able to demonstrate proficiency. And, you know, you see some of those kids that, you know, that's not the attendance rate for every single kid. Keep in mind, these are only the attendance rates for those who did not recover. Because we had some kids who were there for, even more to your point, who went for 2 or 3 days, wrapped up the work that they, you know, had done poorly on or hadn't done it all or whatever, and they were able to demonstrate that, and then they earned credit and moved forward. These are just the kids who did not get credit. And only 2 of them, out of all of those, you know, courses that they qualified for, went for more than 50% of the sessions and still didn't make it. 2. So that's why I try to break it down by the, you know, even by the percentage there. You know, I would say a genuine, you know, effort and attempt would be more than half of the days that we offered that program, plus the kids who did recover. It was 96.6%. It was 57 out of 59 kids who that describes, you know, were able to get it. So I know what you're saying as well. There is a heck of a balancing act to consider right now, because I don't like the number 107. Of course I don't like the number 107. And when I put that number up on the board in a faculty meeting, people at the faculty meeting didn't like that. So we did an activity, and Kate, it's the same activity that we did when we were in brass, where there were statements that were written that were, you know, you have 4 options. And, you know, physically people got up and they moved to different locations. It was either they strongly disagreed, they agree, or they strongly agreed with the statement at hand, right? And one of the statements was a 2.5 course score is too high a mark to earn credit. And the vast majority of educators stood on they strongly disagreed, or they disagreed that that is too high a mark. But then I literally said, well then, how do we have 107 kids who didn't earn credit within, now again, some of those other kids earned credit, you know, over 57 of them in recovery then earned credit, which is great for recovery, but it begs the question, okay, so what has to change? What multiple things have to change? And Kate, we did that same activity, and there were 8 students there that day, and, you know, again, Kate is a very eloquent student, and she recognizes that the students in brass are active and engaged students who, generally speaking, do well in their courses. 7 of the 8 of them in that moment said, no, 2.5 seems pretty reasonable. You know, some of the other comments, and, you know, Stefan, if you want, Kate, if you remember anything specific, you know, you kind of have to just, you know, show up and give a little bit of effort to get at least a 2 or a 2.5. Like it has to go to at least that mark. But then that conversation shifted a little bit, because one student, and I'm not going to name the person's name, but one student said, but what about that kid, and we've alluded to that hypothetical kid a couple of times tonight, what about that kid who, generally speaking, is just going to get by?
Right. What's a 2.5 equal on the 100-point scale that nobody wants to tell?
It doesn't.
Well, no, I'm asking. I am forcing a conversation. Michael.
Thank you. So.
Wait, can you tell me what it equals?
On the draft policy, we have a 2.5 equating to a C. Again, I shouldn't say equating, as a reference point.
Correct.
Okay, for people. So I'm going to share my opinion. I wasn't asked, but I'm going to share it anyway.
Okay, thank you.
So that exercise that Mr. Finch went through with the staff around asking whether 2.5 is too high or not, that's because I have a concern that 2.5 is too high, and it's not capturing those students that are working very, very hard, doing the best that they can, and not able to achieve a 2.5. I think that the 2.5 is too high. So that's where that exercise came from. My concern prompted that exercise. I also think that we need a grading expectations policy, particularly have Mr. Finch work with his staff to develop a grading expectations policy that all teachers abide by in order to build consistency.
Great.
I also think that there needs to be more graded assignments so that a student's grade doesn't rely on potentially a handful of assignments or assessments, if you will. I think grades need to be updated more frequently for families. We just did a demonstration with Alma the other day and what the capabilities of their grade book is, particularly around grading and reporting. So we are looking at that, but more specifically in a grading expectations policy, you would outline when grades need to be updated, and I think they need to be updated more frequently so students and families, parents, guardians know and can check more frequently as to what the student's grade is at that current time. We did put in the draft policy IKA. Might not be popular wording, but this is wording that I specifically came up with, is that no assignment or assessment that is not graded on a 4-point scale, at a 4-point, goes into the calculation of a grade. So it still gives teachers the opportunity to give assignments, say a 2 out of 2, because there are foundational assignments that are given, formative assignments, or 3 out of 3. However, in the overall course calculation or course content or content area calculation, that if an assignment is not at a level of a 4, a student doesn't have an opportunity to achieve a level of 4, then it shouldn't go into any type of mathematical calculation. So those are some of the areas that I feel need to be addressed, that I've started the conversation in addressing those. But I specifically, my own personal opinion is that the 2.5 is too high, and that we need to capture a population of students that are working very hard that not necessarily can achieve that 2.5. So I think all of those things we need to work towards and move. I do feel that the draft policy that the Internal Policy Committee is going to see is going to address some of these concerns. It's not going to hit a 100-point scale mark. It's not going to show, it's not going to hit specifically, we're not going to a letter grade, but it does give a reference point, and I think of you every time, Jeff, that I want a parent and a student to be able to look at a 4-point scale and have a reference point. So we've been working very hard on this, but I do feel that there are grading practices that need to be hashed out, and that there is a specific expectation that is outlined so that it builds consistency with our teachers. And I'm talking specifically at the high school level right now, because I'm not hearing the same concerns at the middle school. And when we get to the high school, it's a much higher stake. We have credit-bearing courses that are at stake. So that's where I'm at this point, and that's what we're really trying to work toward.
So, Mr. Jersey, I'm not going to disagree with much of what you said, what you just said. If in comparatively, speaking, when you're wanting to try to that equate, if we backed up in a traditional 100-point scale, you're looking tests and quizzes. Tests would be worth 20%. Throughout the course of a term. Your quizzes might be 15%. Your final is going to be 10%. A midterm is going to be 10%. Homework is probably going to be in there somewhere, 10% and 15%. But competencies doesn't adjust. It doesn't even factor in. You can't get any credit, for lack of a better term, for the homework, which is what you're talking about, where students are working hard. They're just not quite achieving that, and that's I think the failure point of competence is. But again, like I said, I'm not going to disagree with much of what you said. The flip side of that coin, I just wanted to ask you for purposes of planting a seed, would some of these students that aren't quite making that or climbing over that hurdle or that bar, should we be starting to engage in a conversation with other districts about a regional alternative school? And would that help the situation? I don't know. You know the student body better than we do. And would that, would that be a good course?
Well, two responses to that. One, particularly after this data and working with the Belmont or the high school's at-risk team, we've had, and Tanya has been a part of the conversations about, okay, so what are some programming considerations that we can make? We're looking at trying to identify kind of cohorts of concern, I guess is one way to look at it. What is kind of the background of some of the students who are not being successful? The issue that is going to come up if you're talking about some sort of new programming or new school is going to be money. And there used to be an alt school at Laconia High School, and I believe Belmont is prior to my being here. But when I was at Winnisquam, we had students who attended the alt program at Laconia. I believe Belmont had some students who attended the alt program, and it was not cheap. And Laconia High School, was footing the majority of that bill, from what I understand, and it got to a point where they couldn't sustain it anymore. And it was not quite on their, it was like across the street from their campus, and it was an alternative. I wasn't in it enough to say it was a great alternative, but I would say it was an alternative for some of the students. But when that dissolved, it dissolved.
I think to your question, Mark, you're talking about potentially a handful of students. My concern is a larger percentage of students that we need to capture and address. Good. And I do not feel, I strongly don't feel that competency-based education is the issue or the concern around capturing these particular students or this population. I think we really have to look more closely at our grading practices. Not necessarily the grading scale, which we have significantly, but it's the grading practices in general. Not losing sight of the importance of the teaching and learning. Grading reporting is on the tail end. Teaching and learning is the most important aspect of everything that we do. So we've made great strides. We've been working on this since August, and there's still more work to do, but I do feel that what we're going to be bringing forward at the end of this month, particularly around our grading scale, is going to help address some of these concerns. But the ones I laid out tonight that I still have concerns about, we need to address.
I have a question. In the grading practices, would that have like examples or like some sort of concrete way for teachers to look, like make sure it's consistent how they're applying their grades like across? I don't know how you do that, but like I've noticed a lot of times it's hard to go from the like terminology to what it actually looks like in the classroom. So would it include something to help bridge that gap? I guess is my question.
I don't know at this point, Kate. I'm raising my thoughts and my opinions, and one of the nice things about working in this district is that we work with the staff and the students to make these adjustments along the way. We might not agree throughout the process, however, we usually come out on the other end with something that's going to work for everybody. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I have an additional question for Mr. Finch on the recovery documents. So as I go through this, the very last section under outcomes is failed below recovery eligible by department. There's math, English, science, social studies, applied arts, and then there's another department added that wasn't referenced anywhere else in this document.
Special education or support courses?
Are those students that are part of that program, or are those classes offered in that?
No, it's students who are involved in some of those, special education specific, there are special education specific students who did not achieve credit in some of the courses that are specifically designed and instituted for their support. Ones that are credit bearing.
Special ed support, is that what you're talking about?
Thank you.
Which includes, Sean, one course that is called Skills for Success. I know you were alluding to, do we have a course? We do have a course, Skills for Success, but it's limited in scope to, a certain population.
When we're doing finals, when the students are doing finals and it's being assessed across all competencies?
It's not every standard.
Well, it might depend on the class.
Correct. Yeah, it's not universal that it's on every standard.
Right. Where does that go? Will depend on how they structure it, but where does it go? Meaning, if you have my most recent experience would be honors calculus, right? And I know how he did, so I'll use him, my son. But he was assessed in all areas of calculus, and I know what his grades were, but I have no idea how that factored into the standards.
It's a cumulative opportunity for them to demonstrate the standards. It goes into that same body of evidence that other pieces of evidence were in.
It really depends on how the teachers value the final. For some teachers, so like my art classes, each assessment that we do gets assessed for all standards. So it just gets added in with all your other assessments for that standard. Some teachers value the final to be more, and that could have a bigger impact on your standard grade. Some teachers value it more equally with all of your other evidence. But the standard grade itself that's not calculated. The teacher just looks at the evidence and chooses the grade to put in. So it does differ how the different teachers value the different assignments.
So that's another level of inconsistency
Yes.
from class to class.
Potentially, yeah.
But it's also somewhat dependent on, if a student was coming into the final and they were really struggling in a standard and all of a sudden it clicked,
That has
and
to
that
be-
student
that shows that
demonstrates that cumulative understanding,
Yeah, no,
that's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some teachers average out all your work to get a standard grade, and some teachers don't. It just depends.
Okay. Any other questions? How many students did not qualify for credit recovery? Is it 107 minus 67?
The failures below recovery eligibility by student was 57. So if again, we're playing the hypothetical game, if the mark was a 2.0 and no other factors were considered, then that would be the number of students who did not pass at least a course in the first semester. It would be down to 57.
How many courses or students, or I don't know, were below being able to be eligible for recovery?
57 students.
Out of the 107?
Correct.
Wow.
Now, keep in mind that could be a student who is represented in both the recovery eligible and not eligible portions. Because if a student had a 1.0 in one class, they were not recovery eligible. If they had a 2.2 in another, they were. So that one student could be in the 57 and in the 67.
Which is why there's a difference if you add them together.
Correct.
And it comes to 124 versus 107.
Okay. So if you look to the right of that number as well, Michelle, you see, I tried to break it down by the number of courses that were failed by those particular 57 students. So you see that there are some students who very poorly. One thing as well, I know you're talking about grade levels and freshman failures versus others. One thing to note, at least to some degree, is that's based on more or less the age of the student. So a sophomore who did not pass a freshman Foundations of Literature course and had to repeat it, if he or she did not pass it again as a sophomore, that would be considered a sophomore who did not pass a class, even though it was a freshman class. So when it was broken down by grade level, it was by the student, not by the grade level of, or the anticipated grade level of the class.
Okay, any other questions? All right, board member reports. Jeff.
I'd just like to say, National Honor Society put on a candidates night. They did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't speak so well, but they did excellent.
You did great.
I was glad to see them involved in the community and the process and everything else. That's all I got.
I don't have anything.
Pass.
Doing my best to collect SAP for the middle school, but it's, as I already identified, it's been a very strange year for SAP, so I've only been able to get in about 35, 38 gallons into the middle school, but we're still trying to get it in.
Okay, dropout data. Michael?
You can just see, as we've done each year, we've given you basically our number of our dropout rate, grades 9 through 12. This is for the 2022-2023 school year. We have one student that earned their high set and 8 students that have dropped out, so that's 9 total, which gives us a 2.18% dropout rate. I always find it amazing how we have to consider a student that earned their high set as a dropout. Same thing if we had a student go into an alternative program, particularly that could still earn their degree, it would be considered a dropout. So we're 2.18% for 22-23. Slightly lower than
the year
21-22.
Do we know where any of those students are?
That's the problem. So it's not due to lack of effort on the school administration and or even our school resource officer. Some of these students just disappear. We can't find them. And there's no indication as to where they are, where they went. But several of these students just had stopped coming to school, and then we try to locate them. Therefore, at some point, we have to take them off of our books.
So this says that if they're under the age of 18, that they're not considered a dropout until the school has done their due diligence to locate them.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any that are not reflected on here that are missing?
That I don't know specifically.
And this is last year, so so we don't know what's happening this year.
Correct. I don't have this year's number.
Other questions? Okay, next up is program of studies. I do want to highlight what's in red in this document relates to the grading scale, which is pending. So when we discuss this, we're not approving a grading scale. I just want to be clear, because Right, yes. Any?
So I have a question, and I talked to guidance at the middle school when my daughter brought home the form for classes for freshman year. I mean, first off, she brought it home on a Thursday and back on a Friday, and there was no time. But Algebra 1 is split into two classes at the high school.
And that's very consistent particularly in this area, is that other schools use a full year of algebra for freshmen.
Well, right, but it's not a full year. It's 2 years of content because of block scheduling.
To some degree, I would say that there were adjustments made when standards were aligned to those classes. But additional opportunities to practice them, that was taken into consideration.
Right, my concern though is that with the competencies, if you're taking 2 years of coursework to get through Algebra 1, and undoubtedly it was identified as a need because of failure rates for students, I'm assuming, in whatever the traditional Algebra 1 content would be. But you've eliminated, you've taken one whole year's worth of content off the table because you've stretched Algebra 1 out into 2 years.
Unless students have taken it at the middle school.
Correct.
But why don't we have an Algebra 1, straight one semester Algebra 1?
Because of the determination that students need more practice. I mean, my concern is if we're getting into this and we're going to give students less time with math, that's not really, consistent with what we were just looking at in terms of, concerns with students, success.
I always understood Algebra 1, and I told Mark this, I always understood Algebra 1A and 1B to be essentially almost like the foundational skills of, I'm going to say pre-algebra, that build. I'm concerned that, and I had made this note regardless of, I was concerned, what if there are students who could do Algebra 1 in one semester and we're requiring them to do 1A and 1B?
It's never been discussed.
I had a question about the Algebra 1, but not related to that. It was the removal of the honors credit. I was just wondering why, because I took Algebra 1 in middle school, but I do have honors credit for that, so I was just curious why that was being removed.
Yeah, the department was looking at that and thought that the foundational skills are really the focus of the class, and so they wanted to remove the honors option.
So anyway, my concern was that you're eliminating a year's worth of potential, math class for the fairly traditional student who would enter into algebra in their freshman year by the time they get to senior year.
Can I ask, how is it a year?
Well, block scheduling. You have a year's worth of, take Algebra 2. Algebra 2 will run from September to January.
Okay, so it's a semester that you're concerned about, not a year.
Well, but it's block scheduling, so it's a year's worth of content. You get your entire credit in one semester.
Right, but you would still be taking Algebra 1 in one of the semesters. So if you have 2 of those, there's 2 semesters, you're not removing both of them unless you took algebra at the middle school. So, your concern, I'm listening to your concern about the way that this is structured, but it's not a loss of a year in the way that you're looking at it. It would be a semester because one way or another, they have to take Algebra 1. Whether that's done in a semester or 2.
Right, but if it's done but it's still, I guess, when I talked to guidance at both the middle school and the high school, I guess I wasn't explaining myself, but when you if you're, and I understand you're getting a credit for both for both.
For each, yeah.
Yeah, for each one, I get that, and I don't have an issue with that. But when you spread the content of algebra out over basically two entire classes or 2 years worth of curriculum, I understand it's happening in 1 year, but because of block scheduling, it's happening, it's 2 years worth of content. And how is that not? Because the whole rationale for block scheduling is that you take a year's worth of, you take a whole ELA, ninth grade ELA, and your classes are twice as long, and it's only for 1 semester. So you've taken that year's worth of content, you've put it into 1 semester, you get your one credit. Well, in Algebra 1, you've gone the opposite direction. You've taken that content and you've now spread it out over 2 semesters, which is 2 years of content.
For additional practice and different foundation. I understand the question about, is it possible for a student, and at present it is not, for a student to take a semester that would cover the entire content of the 2 semesters, and that is not something that's offered. But the rationale for it, as you alluded to, was to try to get students a foundation in algebra, because that was identified as the primary building block that the other math classes in the high school are built on, whether it's Algebra 2 or geometry or otherwise.
So just out of curiosity, if that was an identified need to where students were really lacking in math skills, are we trying to address that at the middle school or even earlier on, or is the long-term solution to have Algebra 1 spread out over 2 years of content?
Well, I don't want to address a question about another building, but again, we were having conversations today about aligning grading practices and looking at where standards stand. Half of the time that the content areas got together, they were looking directly at student data over the last 2 years and where they stood in certain standards and what trends we're seeing and things like that. So the work is being done, but this is the high school's program of studies.
I should know this, but I'm going to ask. The honors course, is that separate from the non-honors?
Sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. Sometimes there is a course that is specific to honors, but because of the size of our school and the size of our faculty, oftentimes it is what's called an embedded honors, and there are opportunities for a student to work toward honors credits.
I know you mentioned like the staffing concern about Algebra 1 honors. That can't just be taught to a subset of students in that course? Like, I don't know how to explain it, but basically, can't you teach Algebra 1 and have a subset of students doing additional work at an honors level?
That's what had previously been done.
Instructor.
That's what was previously done, and the department felt that it was the focus needed to be on building those skills up as a course.
So, you had a question about Algebra 1 as well?
I already asked it.
For Running Start, you had, where is it? Astronomy and Space Exploration is listed as a Running Start class, but not listed on page 9 as a Running Start class.
Just an omission. I can
Okay,
fix that.
so I just wonder, is it still a Running Start class?
Yeah, when that is offered, it can be
Yeah.
offered as a running start.
And then, do teachers, are there incentives for teachers to qualify to teach Running Start?
Not financial.
Okay. Because I was disappointed to see that we're not going to be teaching statistics or even qualitative reasoning, which were Running Start previously. And I'm not saying that we have a teacher who's qualified to teach Running Start. I just wondered, I think we do need to take a look at how we encourage financially or otherwise, which I know is then a union thing, I get it, but more teachers to teach Running Start classes, which isn't a reflection of you, it's just, or the program of studies,
Yeah.
it's just.
For the weighted grades, we're adding in that GPA is weighted relative to course selections and credits attempted. Something that we've been talking about is students don't have access to, never see the actual amount that those classes get weighted. We have no idea what classes get weighted what and how that has an impact on our GPAs. So I'm not saying that it needs to be in here, but I would like to see some actual numbers and a place that students could access those so that they understand how our weighting system works and then how that has an impact on their GPAs and what class, if they want, what classes do they take to have, what classes have weighted grades and then what that number actually is.
That was in our
Should be a perfect
handbook.
Huh?
I thought that's in our student handbook, but
I don't, if it is, I don't think it's specific. It might be in there, but I don't think there's numbers attached to it, unless I missed them, but, because I've talked to some students about that, and the only way we've been able to get that is by directly asking the guidance counselor about a specific class. Oh, and then I had another thing, which was, with the calculus honors section, there was just a bit of redactions, and there was a spot that didn't make sense that I think just needs a word added.
What page you at?
I have to scroll to it. It's on page 34. It says, although this is not an advanced placement course, the material covered matches that may be covered in a Calculus 1 course.
that which meaning?
So I think it was just missing a word.
That was on 34, you said, Kate?
Yes.
And I think on page 10, when the proficiency scale.
Michelle, can you give me 1 second? I'm just looking for exactly where that is. I don't want to
Sure.
miss that. So is it the material covered matches what may be covered in college calculus?
Yes, and it's just missing the word what, I think.
Okay, so I think I've addressed that already in my draft.
Oh, okay,
It just is a typo.
it's just not in here.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that's
sorry
fine,
about that. All right, sorry, Michelle.
No, it's fine. I think on page 10, did you change the proficiency scoring here? And if that's the case, we should probably make it red.
It should be in red.
Okay.
I liked the addition of data science and robotics classes.
I did too. That was great.
I mean, certainly bringing back robotics, you and I were speaking about it earlier, I'm really excited about that. And I think I was not the most eager math student, but if I saw the descriptor of data science, I would be interested in taking that class. I'm really looking forward to that.
And then I only had one other question for the tech centers. It shows Hewitt and Winnie, but it doesn't have Concord. Don't we currently allow students to go to Concord?
Only if there was like a program that wasn't offered in one of those two schools, then we would have to work on a regional agreement on that. We don't have any students who are presently doing that. We have, we don't have anybody going to the Ag Center this year, actually. It's all going to Hewitt at the moment.
We only note those that we're in a regional agreement with. However, if any of those schools, any of those two CTE centers don't offer a program, our students can go to any other CTE center in the state reasonably in distance from where they live.
On page 4, which changes to the minimum number of students in the class.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on why there was a change?
Absolutely. Honestly, looking at the fact that there was a hard set number, was kind of a shoot yourself in the foot type of situation, where if we abided by that, but we could have offered a class to fewer students than that, why are we not offering that? So basically, we will offer as many classes that students want as we possibly can. If it has a negative impact on, other class sizes and things like that, that all has to be taken into consideration. But we just wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves a leniency to offer it if we can. Having hard set numbers is just, in my opinion, it's not a wise thing to do.
I still think that if there's a board policy discussion, that would supersede what is here. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I want to run as many options and course offerings as possible, but I feel like there might be times that we would benefit from a bigger class somewhere else in order to free up other teachers or other offerings. I want to make sure that policy would supersede anything that the high school comes up with. We don't have anything from a policy perspective as far as I know, but I know we've talked about it.
Well, we would have to be consistent between our policy and what's in here.
Yeah.
I don't-
But the policy,
Well, then this would change.
yeah.
I don't necessarily think we would want in policy, black and white, because we want to make sure that the
I'm not on
school has the
policy.
flexibility to
I think we'd want to be careful,
provide students opportunities if
I
we
hear
can.
you.
because at the high school, most of the, any other?
This looks like this has been in here for a while. Concerning VLAX, this has sort of been a rule for a while that courses currently offered at BHS will not be allowed to be taken through VLAX. And then the sentence after that has, for information regarding any, you have to go to the counseling department for information regarding any requested exceptions to this practice. And I know why that's in place. We usually have a lot of students who require an exception to that because of the way our schedule is set up. And the conflicts that arise from that for especially students in bands or students in classes that are over multiple years and take away from their time that they have to schedule other classes. VLAX is really important for those students because they need it, and a lot of times it's to cover classes that are offered at the high school but they can't put it in their schedule. So this doesn't need to change in here. I just wanted to say that I think it's really important that those students are allowed to take those classes on VLAX because without them, they can't necessarily get all of the requirements they need for graduation or for the colleges that they're applying to.
And I guess and it probably doesn't come in here, but for the 2A, 2B, is there more things that are being offered to students in that block? I know there's more than that you adopted this year or last year maybe, but.
Yeah, we always explore that when we get course requests, which is this week. Students are doing their course requests right now. So that's not totally a question that I can answer just yet because I have to, we have to see what students are requesting for now.
So this is up for action without anything related to the grading aspect to it. And the reason it's up for action is because students are putting in course requests and they're working on master schedules, right? And all of that stuff.
Motion to approve the BHS 24-25 program of studies, excluding items pending board policy discussions in the future.
Second.
Any additional discussions? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, volunteer list.
Make a motion to accept the volunteer list.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. On the horizon. Yes?
I'm already spacing it, Michael. What did we talk about in buildings and grounds that we have to put on the,
Awarding the contract for the maintenance and lawn mowing for the elementary schools. Sorry, I'm not Michael.
Do we have opportunity to kind of reformat this so that it's broken into two sections, one for on the horizon annual and the second for like items we've elected to add? So like the page one, there's room, two not so much. But like kind of, so if you put a little section, you have the annual items and then things we've kind of discussed as a board. So like to Shan's point, is items for buildings and ground. I talked about adding next month for withdrawal study recommendations, continuing that discussion. Because I know when I look here is when I start to think of things I want to add to upcoming meetings, but they're not necessarily related to the annual on the horizon stuff.
Yeah, we could reformat it.
Thank you.
Anything else for on the horizon? Okay. Seeing none, except for it'll be reformatted and the two items we just talked about. Enrollment report.
Yeah, you can see that our district total is 1,102 students, which is 6 fewer students than were reported in February.
Did we have a month where we increased?
No.
Or has this just been a steady decline?
And we don't know where those 6 students, did they move? Did they?
A combination of moving as well as homeschool.
The kindergarten enrollments are happening this month. I think I saw online. I know I'll be interested to see what those early numbers are next month.
Me too.
Let's see. I do want to point out, particularly for Canterbury Elementary School, we have 16 students in grade 4. I just want to make sure the board is aware of this. We potentially be looking at 2 to 3 students in grade 5 next year because the majority of those students are going to the middle school. So I think it's a discussion that we're going to have at our March 26th meeting as to how we might want to address that. Mrs. Chell will be here for that conversation.
Okay.
I know a parent mentioned to me earlier this week that they thought more had decided to stay. So I'm assuming that she'll have confirmation.
Okay. Debbie?
So in your board packet, I have provided my estimated year-end budget balance. Year-end budget balance is not the same as a fund balance. This is looking specifically at the budget and what we have currently expended and what I am estimating that we will continue to spend through the end of the year. At this point, I'm looking at about a $500,000 under expenditure in the budget. The majority of that is in salaries and benefits, even though we've done a much better job of hiring people. The turnover has resulted in us having some savings because people are coming in at lower rates, and the benefit plans that they're selecting are lower, plus fixed costs are not as high if they come in at a lower rate. So that is where I am looking at this point.
Questions for Debbie?
You mentioned areas of significant over expenditures, including purchase services and repair and maintenance. Do you have examples?
So we have had some significant contracted services with special ed. That was one of the areas that we put in the budget for next year, because we've had to contract services for the BCBA, which costs more. So looking to have some of those savings by hiring our own. We've had some unexpected repair and maintenance requirements, such as the Canterbury well. So that's gone into the projection going out. So there's been some significant items that have come up that needed to be addressed.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Debbie? Okay, staff handbook amendment.
Yes, so one of the things that we were reviewing again this year, the staff handbook, in the staff handbook, it specifies that support staff employees will be paid in accordance to the salary schedule developed and listed in Appendix A. By virtue of the fact that that's in the handbook, it means the handbook would have to be revised every single year because we'd have a new Appendix A every year. So the recommendation that I'm presenting is that we just update the handbook wording so it would read that support staff shall be paid in accordance to a salary schedule developed by the board. The salary schedule would then be provided to all support staff. So that way we're not duplicating that entire handbook every single year.
And having them sign every year.
Right.
Make a motion to amend the staff handbook to eliminate the reference to Appendix A.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.
The next thing I have is the high school generator. I had submitted applications for generators for many of our schools this year under a Safe Community grant, which unfortunately we did not get approved for. But the high school generator in particular is the one that you're all aware of that we do have problems with, and the high school is an emergency evacuation site. If we have an issue with the generator not working, that creates a problem with us being an evacuation site. So my proposal is that we approve the purchase of the generator. Based on my analysis of the budget, we do have funds within the budget to cover that cost. And additionally, I have reached out to Homeland Security and Emergency Management to see if we can potentially get part of that cost covered. So I've started those conversations with them. I'm not sure when I'm going to hear back, but we do need the generator for the high school.
What's the lead time on the generator?
30 weeks,
30 weeks.
which puts us right at the start of the winter months.
Right.
And I want the board to know that I did approach the Belmont Board of Selectmen. I attended their meeting 2 meetings ago, asking if they would consider paying 50% of that cost. And I'm waiting to hear back from them. However, in the meantime, I do feel that we should purchase this generator, and if we can get the town to contribute 50% of that, then that would just be something we could work out after we've already put the order in, quite honestly.
What's the age of the one that we have and what seems to be the,
It was put in when the high school was built,
okay.
and the parts have just worn out and they can't be replaced.
We're moving from a diesel to a propane, so that we're not worried about the diesel. And we currently have propane tanks on site that we'd be able to connect directly to.
Bless you.
And Steve stated at the building and grounds that every time they come out, it's costing us thousands to limp it along. It's getting by right now, but the next breakdown, I said it could be $1,000 fix or a $30,000 fix.
If they can even get the parts.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, like the last time, what was it, it was control board, right? I can't remember.
Yeah,
It's in there.
Is it
It
the
took like-
generation
it
end of
took them
things,
like
or is it
6
on
weeks
the
to get-
mechanical end of things?
It's just, they're not making parts anymore for that generator, so.
The general life of a generator is considered to be 15 years.
And
The
how long?
propane's
The high
way
school
more
was built in
efficient.
1998.
Thank you.
Well, it's less problematic.
Yeah, it's a lot more efficient, less maintenance, so.
And unfortunately, this is incorrectly listed. It should be for an action item.
Okay, we can shift that to an action item.
I thought we talked about different funding mechanisms for this. Why, how did we land on unexpended budget? Because we had enough to cover it? I can't remember.
We have enough to cover. I mean, you can take it out of retained fund balance if you wanted to do
Retained fund
that,
balance is what we
but you just
talked
have to have a public hearing. But we certainly have the funds in the current budget that we wouldn't really need to go to retained fund balance.
So Debbie, question, does the $59,786, was that included in your estimate of the $500,000 for?
No,
Okay. So if we were to take it out of this year's funds,
it would reduce that
it would reduce
$500,000.
that $500,000 by the 59, close to $60,000.
FEMA also has fundings for generators for critical facilities.
Correct, that was who I reached out to. Emergency Management and Homeland Security is FEMA.
And it didn't qualify.
I haven't heard back yet. I reached out to them, and then I did the page that says, this is what we're interested in doing. It's the initial process. Once they review that, if they feel that we qualify, then they can send me the application to complete. Again, no guarantee. And I've heard mixed reports. One said if you've already entered into a contract to purchase, then they may not cover it. But that's why I reached out ahead of time and just said, look, we're an emergency evacuation site. Our generator needs to be replaced. We have to do this. We'd really like to get some help with it.
We're also a warming shelter, right? In the winter.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's state money or things like that that could be put to
Well,
it?
the reason-
It's all files under the same.
Okay.
The reason we're kind of pushing is 30 weeks, so.
Right.
So order it like the next month, we're pretty well.
So if we order it, and then you want to look at the funding streams that you're,
I'm still going to explore whatever I can for funding streams, but we do need to get this taken care of.
Is there a cost estimation for, to connecting to the tanks?
I don't have that cost estimation, but Steve didn't believe it was going to be that bad with
Is it a
disconnecting.
long run, or is
Yeah.
it fairly close?
Don't know.
I think it's like within 50 feet.
He was estimating somewhere around $2,000
Yeah,
plus.
so it's an easy trench.
You can actually leave tonight, you can look right at generators there, and then the propane tanks are right on that opposite side, you know, where the robotics room is.
Okay.
They're right in front of there.
Okay.
So it's not a big run.
Gotcha.
Motion
We
to
need
approve
action.
the purchase of the BHS generator in the amount of $59,786 to come from the 23-24 unexpended budget.
Second?
Should we include to include the cost of installation, even though it's an unknown?
So, yeah, so I guess my follow-up question to that was, what was Steve thinking? He would take it out of his own budget?
Right, yeah, I mean,
he would just household.
find it within the maintenance of this
Petty
budget.
cash.
So the answer, I guess, is no then.
Yeah, we're fine with this motion, and then.
Okay.
Did someone second it?
Yeah.
Jeff?
Okay. Any additional discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, strategic direction. I know you're...
Yeah, so just want to talk to the board about how we would like to move forward with the strategic direction process. I do know that we included the strategic direction in your folder, so you could review that. Several months ago, I mentioned that if the board was interested to at least maintain our current strategic direction until we go through a review and revising process, that we take our current strategic direction, remove the date on the cover page, and remove the action strategies that are listed, I believe, starting on page 16, but keep everything in place. We actually still use the strategic direction, particularly in our planning. Several of the statements that are within that were used today during our professional development around our beliefs and so forth, so we are still using this strategic direction. So if the board was interested in at least maintaining our current strategic direction, I would recommend that we remove the date and remove the action strategies and maintain the current document until we're ready to go through that process of reviewing and revising. But that's the will of the board. This isn't an action item, it's just for consideration.
What do we want to do?
What's the alternative?
Keep it as
One
is.
alternative, do nothing. Just keep an old document on this site.
Yeah.
The other option is we go through a big fall
Right.
strategic direction process for the district.
My only concern about keeping it as is, which is fine, is that the action strategies are somewhat moot at this point in the sense of the dates are there and so forth, and the date on the cover page. So, you know, we always talk about communication and updating our website. Well, we have a document on here that is outdated according to the date on the page, cover page.
There's things on here that are ongoing though and annually that we should kind of retain.
My concern is I don't want to lose the ongoing, or even the things that haven't been attained, that we still may have an interest in doing.
In achieving.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm okay taking them, but I still feel like we have to have them set aside for us.
Absolutely, those will not be lost in any way whatsoever. A lot of work went into those. I'm just trying to see if the board would be interested in having a document available to the public as well as what we're currently using in the district that is more up to date prior to going into a full review and revising process.
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with that.
So do we want to put, just a new timeframe to, I mean, what's the date on it that it expired?
It was a 5-year, right?
Yeah, it was fine.
It's 2022.
You just make it 27.
17, 20.
So I think what if I'm hearing the board is interested in doing that, is that I would just revise this document and bring it forward to the board and then have the board vote on it at that point. Just go through that. I just didn't want to make any changes to this direction without the board expressing their opinions and thoughts as to whether that's a good idea.
So is this to maintain for another 5 years, or are we looking at something shorter? I guess that ultimately, that was my question.
And would you be able to just do it similar to how you did the program of studies is laid out, where we can just see what's like highlighted yellow is going, red is?
Yeah, I'll make sure the
Really
board,
quick to scan,
board's aware of the changes that we would
so
make.
not to cross-reference.
Correct. Make it nice and easy for you.
I am not sure, I mean, your question around time frame, I think is interesting. I would like us to be engaged with the community much sooner than 5 years to go through this, but it costs money, so that was, well, it doesn't cost money to engage with the community, but it costs money to have a consultant, and so I don't know that I personally just want to put 5 years on it and then not do anything for 5 years.
Well, but even if we did, I mean, if we extended it out from 22, I mean, there's 27, and 27 is not that far away.
True.
I guess so is it 5 years from 22? Is it 5 years from 24? I mean, that's the question that I'm asking. I mean,
I would assume when we redo it, that restarts the clock.
Yes.
Otherwise, you could do it and then eventually have to do it like 2 years later. So it would then restart the 5 years.
Like if we approved it.
so then we'd go out to 29 then.
No, I meant like if we redo the strategic direction next year, then the 5 years would start. This is only bringing us to current. I know we all talked about how we didn't do it this year because of budget, but that we wanted to start it for next year. So to me, we change it to 2017 to current. We set the intention among the board of when we're going to do it, and when we redo it and go through the process, that restarts the 5-year clock.
You mean once we redo it?
Correct.
I hear what you're saying.
I was originally not inclined to put a date on it, but I guess I'm more inclined to go with what you're saying, because it'll keep us honest too. My other concern about not putting a date on it would be we could kick the can down the road.
Indefinitely.
Right. Yeah.
So if we're to put a date on it, I would say put 2025 on it. Because again, you're talking about developing a budget for 25, 26 that could potentially include facilitation of that work. Therefore, 2025 would get you into January of 25 through December of 25. So it would give you time and you potentially have money to do that. But we can talk about the date. I'll do the amendment and then you can always change the date and further discussion.
I guess I just want to throw out, I don't know if this has to cost money if we had full board involvement. Like, if you have full board involvement, you get the community involved, try to get the community involved, the full board's involved. Superintendent would have a big piece of this, and I'm not, I know I'm saying this, but I'm not really saying this, but the superintendent to some degree could lead this project with a lot of board involvement. I don't want to put it all on the superintendent because I think the board owns this, and I feel like they should be involved as well. And if there's breakout groups, board members leading each breakout group, but I don't think it's totally true that we have to spend X thousands of dollars.
I think we could do it simply, but I would prefer at least someone from the outside organizing us and directing us and.
I don't think we had that last time.
Oh, yeah, we did.
We did?
That way.
So, being Darby.
We also need someone to do the documentation.
Right.
So, we already had 2 iterations of this.
So both
Both times?
The initial strategic direction when it was developed was facilitated by B. McGarvey. The second time, the facilitation for the action strategies was facilitated by Doug Finn. So both times we went, the original development was by a consultant, the second time was by a consultant as well. for the facilitation piece in general. So, and one of the things, particularly around strategic planning, is that the superintendent needs to be part of the discussion and not necessarily facilitating, because when
I'm not saying there aren't benefits, I'm just saying that
focusing on facilitating, you're not part of a discussion because you're facilitating the discussion, so.
That
I
is
think
true.
But I agree, we could do it
Simply.
simply.
I
Like,
agree,
this
too.
was a big thing. It was good, but it was a lot and expensive, right, previously.
I think in the meantime, because we'll keep this on as an agenda item.
Yeah.
Get a document that we can continue to work with, that's up to date, basically on the dates, and then continue the conversation as to how we want to make it work in the future. Okay, so I'll bring a document to you at some point to look over, and it'll be an action item.
very simple request. I'm kind of anal about these things, but I detest the wrapping on this document. Like, I don't understand, like, it's not wrapping correctly. It should be clean. So,
You mean in the
it should
cell?
end at 9 and then number 10 on the next page, and then a whole new section right underneath that, like, something's not right.
Okay. We can
I'd like to look a
format
little
it,
more professional. Thank you.
clean it up.
My guess is it probably got screwed up when it was converted to a PDF from whatever original format it was
Oh,
in.
yeah, I see some of that.
We'll clean it up some the same way, Sean.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't notice that. Okay. You have, no, okay. Next up, 2 policies. We did the first reading at the last meeting, this time by Kate Banks. This time is up for action. First up is mandatory drug and alcohol testing, school bus drivers and contracted carriers, which we added in contracted carriers.
Motion to approve updates to internal policies, EEAEA and EEAEA as presented.
Second?
It's EEBA, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
EEBA.
EEAEA and EEBA.
She's saying both. Any discussion? Oh, did someone second it?
I did.
Okay. Any discussion?
I have none.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Done. Okay, then there's nominations. Which is a non-public. So there is, first up is Appendix B nominations and spring coach, so spring coach nominations. And we can approve these in public if nobody has anything of a personnel nature.
Make a motion to accept the Appendix B nominations for the spring sports coach nomination.
Second.
Any discussion that we can have? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And then there's the nomination of the Title I teacher at BES.
Motion to accept the nomination for the Title I teacher at BES.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Next up, public communication and correspondence. Seeing none? Next up is non-public.